Hello, my name is Bertina Long. I am a student at Aspen University. I will be presenting on conducting a research study. So, in order to conduct a research, I wanted to define the actual term research. So, according to Webster Online Dictionary, the word research can be defined as a studious inquiry or examination, especially investigation or experimentation aimed at the discovery and interpretation of facts, revision of accepted theories or laws in the light of new facts, or practicable application of such new or revised theories or laws. Now that we have a clear definition of what research actually is, now we will actually get into conducting a research. So now we have our definition of research. Now I must decide, what am I researching? When conducting research, you must answer the question of what am I researching? So I need to decide on a topic. So what am I most interested in? What do I want to find out about as far as more information? Once I decide on that, I should review literature on this topic and form my question. So, once I decide on the topic that I want to research, I need to go back and look at research that has already been conducted on this particular topic. Once I've done that, then I am ready to formulate my hypothesis. Now, my hypothesis is going to be whatever I believe the relationship will be among the variables that are being investigated. I'm also going to have a null hypothesis, which is basically going to be the opposite of what I believe. Now, as you can see in the cartoon here, it says my project is simply this. I want to find out once and for all whether there is any truth in the belief that money can't buy happiness. So, if that was what I want to research, then probably my hypothesis is going to be that money does not buy happiness. And then I will have a null hypothesis, which is going to be the opposite of that, which is money can buy happiness. Now, of course, I don't believe that money can buy happiness. However, I do believe it sure can help. Now, uh, a variable is something that takes on dissimilar values or categories. Now, your research is going to consist of independent variables and dependent variables. Independent variables are the assumed cause of another variable, and dependent variables are the assumed outcome. So now that we have formed our hypotheses, then I'm going to decide, what is my approach? Am I going to do an experimental approach or a non-experimental approach? Now, does this research require an experiment where I'm trying to identify the cause and effect relationship? If so, then experimental is the approach to take. Of course, with an experimental research, it involves manipulation of the independent variable. Now, does the experiment entails no manipulation of the independent variable? If so, then a non-experimental approach is going to be the best thing for this particular research. When we get ready to conduct our research, an institutional approval must be obtained. In order to conduct research on human or animal participants, an individual must receive approval to do so. For animals, approval comes from the Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee. For humans, approval comes from the Institutional Review Board. There are steps that you have to take in order to gain approval from the Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee. The first thing that you have to do is prepare your research protocol. Research protocol lines out every aspect of the study. This will include what type of participant you plan on working with and the procedures that will be utilized in performing the research. So in this case, the participant is going to be an animal or animals. Now, once you provide the research protocol, the Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee will review the proposed study, and then they'll decide if the animals will be utilized in the right way. Once they determine this factor, then you will gain approval or not gain approval. So if you gain approval, then you have permission to go ahead and proceed with your research. However, if you do not gain the approval, then you have the option of going back to review what the concerns were and then make revisions to your research protocol. You also have the option to just scrap the entire research altogether. That is going to be left up to you. Now, for the Institutional Review Board, the research protocol is still going to line out every aspect of the study. This will include what type of participant you plan on working with and the procedures that will be utilized in performing the research. In this case, the participant is going to be the human. Once you have provided the research protocol to the Institutional Review Board, then the review board will review the information that you provide. The IRB reviews the proposed study to decide if the participants will be utilized in the right way, same as in the animal research. However, we need to be really careful as to how we utilize participants, not human participants. Not that animals are not important as well. However, with humans, we have to be very careful, and this can be looked at in the prime examples of the need for the IRB in the different research studies such as the Nazi medical war crimes, the Tuskegee syphilis study, the Jewish chronic disease hospital study, and the Willowbrook study. Now, some of these studies I was aware of, and some of them I was not. I do recommend that you do click on the link if you haven't heard of these studies, that you take a look at these studies, and they are prime examples as to why we need the IRB and why this step is such an important step. Now, once the IRB review the proposed study, then you will either receive approval or not receive approval. And there again, if you do not receive the approval, then you definitely have to go back and look at what the concerns were and decide if you want to make those revisions so you can try to gain the approval, or if you just want to scrap the research altogether. Now we'll look at sample size. Once the researcher decides on what type of participant will be utilized for the investigation, then we need to decide on the number of participants that we need for the investigation. This number can be one or it can be more. But remember that this number must be conducive with the hypothesis, meaning if you have two groups within the research, then obviously one participant in your sample size will not work. Research instruments. The researcher must decide on how the dependent variable will be assessed. A research tool is an assessment, survey, an examination, a scale, a score, or instrument created to evaluate the variables, the traits, or data of concern. There are many types of instruments that you can utilize for your research. You just need to decide which type of instrument to utilize. Now we need to decide whether or not we will conduct a pilot study. A pilot study is a dry run of the complete research with a small amount of subjects, meaning we are not going to use our entire sample size. It's only going to be a few participants that we're going to conduct this pilot study with. The benefits of the pilot study is it gives insight as to whether the independent variable manipulation generated the proposed result. It also gives the investigator an understanding of the process, and then it can help you recognize any manipulating uh, elements, influencing factors of the study, of the variables. So now we will look at consent forms. Now, participants must be informed of all parts of a research study, meaning every detail of that research study. Participants need to know the ins and the outs because they need to be informed so they can make an informed decision as to whether or not they even want to be a part of your research. There are some participants that are considered vulnerable populations, such as children, prisoners, pregnant women, etc. So therefore, additional steps must be taken to ensure that consent is understood and given when dealing with these particular populations. Proper procedure for research. The researcher should make sure that all factors and information is lined out step by step before the actual study. You want to make sure with animals that the conditions in which they will be studied, as well as how they will be cared for when they are not under observation, is outlined. With humans, we want to make sure to identify how they will be welcome to the study and the form of nonverbal actions such as will I be smiling when I'm asking the interview questions, as well as the vocal actions such as my tone of voice in which the experimenter is to take place. All of this need to be outlined in my procedure for my research study. This concludes my presentation on conducting a research study. I hope this has been informational for individuals who want to conduct a research study. Again, I want to make sure that you know to adhere to all of your steps that you outline for your review boards so that there will be no questions as to the validity of your research. Also, we don't want to have anyone question our integrity when conducting research. So if there are any changes that need to be made for your research, you want to make sure that you go back to those particular review boards that you went before in the first place. Presentation, and so I hope this has been helpful to someone who is looking at researching uh, a particular topic.